This meeting to order. I'd like to begin by saying a pledge of allegiance. Our flag is right behind us here.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome, everyone. Our first order of business today is to approve the minutes. The board all received the minutes in their mailing packet and have time to look at them. Does any board members have any questions regarding the minutes or any corrections? Okay. Okay. Seeing that none of the board members have questions, would someone like to make a motion to approve those minutes?
I'll move that we approve the minutes.
Okay, Scott Brown is made a motion to approve those minutes. All in favor? Excuse me, yes, a second.
Yeah.
Jody, a second. And all in favor?
Aye.
Seconded. I'm sorry, I can't hear. Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you.
Okay, where does it? No public comment is needed.
Oh, I made that mistake
Yeah.
last time.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve and a second. Let's vote on that motion. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Okay, so the motion passes with a vote of 5-0. The next thing on the agenda is approval of the expenses. That was also in your packet. Does any board members have any questions in regards? I've got a little typo here, I'm sorry. Okay, does any board members have any questions concerning the expense report? Nope. If there's no questions, would someone like to make a motion to approve those?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I move the Parks and Recreation Board approve the September 30th, 2021 expenditures.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve and a second. All in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay. All right, so that the expense report is approved with a vote of 5-0. Okay, next order of business are reports from the board member. Does anyone have anything to report?
Sure. Do you want to start at that end or do you want to go this way?
Doesn't matter.
All right. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had opportunity to visit a few of our parks since we met last time. Let's see, early in May, I visited our newest state park at Milltown, and the park manager, Lauren Flynn, was available to come and meet me and kind of give me a tour of the Milltown State Park and some of the improvements there that have been made. It's really nice to see. Talking to Lauren, they had a very busy last year, which was their first season, and he anticipated a much higher visitation numbers for this year. If you haven't seen it, it's really kind of a neat park because it's you're going down the interstate and you look and you see, here it is on the left and here it is on the right. And so many times I've just been by there and didn't even look at it. So it's nice there along the, the Blackfoot and the Clark Fork come together and meet there at that point. So there's a lot of history there. One of the things that they're dealing with is there's just so much usage right there. A lot of the young folks in the town utilize that area for water recreation, a lot of floaters. And it was nice to see Lauren's attitude is like, let's figure out how to deal with all this, the amount of the increase of the folks and the visitation they're going to see there. And it's a challenge, but it was nice to see that he's trying to figure out how to accommodate the people rather than limit the folks. And I was there again later when the weather got really hot and it was packed. I mean, there wasn't a place you could park, but it looked like they were doing a good job managing it. And it was nice to see people out enjoying things. And that area has some very unique features. I know there's like from some of the reclamation, there's a train tunnel on the opposite side of the river. And then there's a lookout on the other side. And then towards it would be south. We have possibly a new entrance and another visitors center down at that end. And that is a pretty substantial area that we haven't even touched yet. So would you see some of the expenditures that we've been looking at and things? There's going to be some neat improvements for there, and it'll be fun to see. Then I stopped by the Beaver Tail Campground after that, which is 15, 20 miles south on I-90, and that campground was full. And this would have been Friday before Memorial Day weekend. It was packed. They have about 25 campsites there, completely full, but nice facility. On the other side of, you can go underneath the interstate, and there's also a pond area that's utilized for different recreation. You can swim, non-motorized boats. It's like a dredge pond that's recreation. There's a trail that goes all the way around it. And there were people there enjoying that. It was nice. Then let's see, June 30th was the grand reopening of Fort Owen State Park. And I was able to be present for that. And there were some presentations from several of the park staff that talked about the history of the place and all of the work that had to be done to get this facility up and going and all the help from the different groups. So we had friends of Fort Owen State Park were there. It was nice to hear from them. And the Montana State Parks Foundation was present as well, which they both had a instrumental effort behind getting this park going. So I got to see some of the improvements there that we approved that project just recently. So it was nice to see things move fast. I was surprised. The access there is real nice. Let's see. Also, I heard from Randy Arnold, who is the Region 2 supervisor, and he went over a project that they're working on that's just adjacent to that, where there's going to be a recreation site on the Bitterroot River from some property that was donated to FWP, and went over some plans that he had there that were laid out real nice. There's going to be some, improved parking area, latrine, and even a few first come, first serve overnight camping opportunities. So this is new. And Randy said this is the only camping available on the Bitterroot between on that section from Hamilton to Missoula. So I didn't know that. So it's nice to see that, because there's a lot of people. In fact, I remember my mom used to go swimming in that spot that is was private. So it's nice. And that area also is adjacent to the city park. So it fits well, I think, with that area, with Fort Owen being right next to it. There's a bike path that runs all the way to Hamilton. So you've got, some kind of all these different uses and some neat stuff to check out along the way. One thing I think Mike Valesky was one that talked, and if you guys have met Mike, he's kind of fun to listen to. He talked about all of the firsts that have happened at Fort Owen. When you think about how old that place is, it's surprising what good shape it's in. And the history there for the history buffs is just amazing. So anyway, and that I got a chance to go through Beaver Tail again, just see it. Now this was when the weather was very hot and people were getting busy, and it was packed again, completely full. And then early in September, I got a chance to visit the Missouri Headwaters State Park. And I think we're going to talk about that again a little later during the meeting. But talk to the camp hosts there and about some of the feedback they're getting for, we're looking at a new management direction for that park. And they've got a survey that's out to the public to get good public feedback on what direction to go with the Missouri Headwaters State Park. So it was nice. And it's great to meet some of the staff and folks working on these parks, and they all seem to be excited about their jobs and excited the direction that Parks is going. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's probably plenty.
No, it was great. Thanks, Member Loomis. Anyone else?
Yeah, I would. I will briefly also. Makoshika Park is down in my area and being Montana's largest state park. The visitation is off the charts this year. It was really fun, and there's been a lot of local interest too, renewed too with the park, which is great. And a lot of locals are organizing things that really help out, like full moon hikes in the park and so on. It's fabulous, simple, but it's fabulous. People like to do that, and I've enjoyed it. Anyway, that's been amazing. Oh, and Dino Dave found another dinosaur named Bob. He got the naming rights, so he's naming it Bob. The camping has been full. And what I found really also kind of interesting is with the renewed interest in the parks areas down there and so on, is the museum, for example. Our little museum has, its visitation has really boomed, and they've done a lot of collaborative work with Makoshika Parks Visitor Center and sending people back and forth, which has been, that's something we never did before. So I think collaborative efforts are always a really good thing. Medicine Rocks, what's to say, got the sanctuary, Dark Skies, and Medicine rocks down in Ekalaka. If you haven't gone, you have to, you just have to. We've got another big project that we're working on, a trails project that will be fun if it comes to fruition. This is kind of a long shot, but it's kind of fun. It'll be a long one. So lots of fun stuff going on. That's all.
Thank you, Member McLean. Thank you, Member McLean. Any other? Mr. Brown?
Yeah, I just had a chance to go to the Fish
Member
Wildlife.
Brown, if you would just speak right into that so the Zoom folks can definitely hear you as well. Thank you.
Is that good?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So I got a chance to go to the open house in Billings with Hank Warsack, and Dustin Temple was there, who's a deputy director, and Bob Gibson, who I believe is Region 5 manager, and Terry Walters, who is the Park Region 5 manager. But I was very impressed with the open house. It drew a whole crowd. We had it outside. It was September 8th, and the weather was great. And, but people really had a chance to talk directly with the director and the others. And I again was very impressed with the questions that were answered and the concerns that people had. And I know they went on throughout the state. So again, very impressive reaching out to the public. And could I just mention one other thing? I called Terry Walters, who again is Region 5 Parks Manager out of Billings. And Terry and I talked, and I was going to try to get her on, but we don't have the audio. She's in Bozeman. So sorry that Terry can't speak on it. Beth is going to update us on Lake Elmo, what's going on. Now, I'll mention this real quick. Terry leaves this evening, I think it's this evening, maybe tomorrow morning, to fly to, I think it's Las Vegas, to watch her college daughter play championship soccer. And so I'm tomorrow getting to watch my granddaughter, and I hope she gets as far as Terry's daughter has gotten. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Brown. Vice Chair Moe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Most of my activity during this period has been on the Smith River, which we'll get to later in today's agenda. Being in my region, I have very close at hand some of the examples of the variety of experiences that our state parks offer. Giant Springs is just on the outskirts of Great Falls, and it's the most visited state park in Montana. And it has been, it's a nice place for people in Great Falls to go just to have an afternoon away. But it's also visited frequently by people coming through Montana. As you may have heard, we had a incident of vandalism there involving the killing of fish, and they have followed up on that. It's a little bit disturbing. And another state park that's a good example of a variety is the First Peoples State Park, which is outside Ulm, in between here and Great Falls, but much closer to Great Falls, about a 10-mile drive. A beautiful historical site from the American Indian perspective. And it's really worth a visit. It's beautifully well done. And then one of the state parks that that I always visit because it's close to where I used to live and where I now live is, boy, the name is escaping me all of a sudden. It's one of our primitive state parks in that it's undeveloped. No, it's the one where Lewis and Clark stood up on the top and what's it called? Tower Rock, yeah. Pompey's Pillars down by you, but Tower Rock is right as they were on the Missouri. It's kind of when you're really going into the mountains. And you can still hike up and stand on that very same place. And one of the ideas that I've always had for the parks that I think would be a good idea is doing some kind of a CD where you could listen to the history of the park as you're driving there. So that you have kind of this, what teachers call this framework that you plug into before you even get there and kind of know what you're looking at. Fort Owen would be fantastic for that as well, I think. But just a great variety of parks and such an enjoyable job that we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I'd report that early this summer, we took a trip, my wife and I, and we went and visited Makoshika, and I met Member McLean there, and we spent some time together. And she said that you definitely need to go to Medicine Rocks, which was right on. That place I'm going back to. And then on our way back, we met Quentin, and he was going to get me some ice cream, but he didn't. And at a gas station, but we traveled back and went to the Madison Buffalo Jump, then to the Missouri Headwaters, and then to Lewis and Clark Caverns on our way home. So it was a nice trip in our camp trailer. A few weeks after that, we went to the Bitterroot. We went to Painted Rock, and that's a very interesting place. Campground, a lot of people right on the lake. Then we went to Fort Owens, and that was just a few days before they had the dedication. Then on to Travelers Rest and spent some time there. Then we went to the Milltown Dam site, that state park. And as Member Loomis says, very busy with people from Missoula. Cars, parking lots full, cars along the frontage roads, just very, very full. And then we stopped at Beaver Tails on the way home. So this spring, we were able to see 10 of our state parks, and it got smoky, so we didn't see any more for the year. But one of the things that I visited with people at every state park, and the maintenance director at Makoshka, and I don't remember his name right off, but this is a very important job for him, working for the state parks. He grew up there. His family had been in Glendive for a long time. His great-great-grandfather's name is on one of the buildings downtown. And he didn't want to move away to get a job. He wanted a job in the town that he grew up in. And he loves his job working for the state parks. And so these jobs are important to the community and important to people that want to stay where they are rooted. So that was a very fun conversation with that person. So that's all I have for my report. Next on business is Director Warsack's agency report.
First of all, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Record Hank Warsack, Director of Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. And I'd like to start by thanking everybody that's on the board. I just really appreciate your dedication and your commitment to doing this. And I really appreciate the opportunity to meet everybody in person. Several I've talked to, I haven't met, so I think this is a great opportunity. I'd like to also welcome aboard Hope Stockwell. And I think I've known Hope for quite a while, and we worked together when she was at the legislature. And I think that she brings something to the department that we really need. And I really look forward to working with her and others in this unit, doing some good things. So I would like to follow up too with something that Member Brown brought up, is that around the state tour, we did that in 3 weeks. We went about 4,000 miles. So I brought my full DO staff, Deputy Director, Chief of Staff, Chief Operations, Legal, and then I also brought a special projects person along. And it was interesting to go to the different regions. We started out by going, the night of it, we'd meet with the public, open door public meeting. We'd have the public come from 5 until about 9. And we baited them. We brought pizza or different things in, so we made sure people came. And then we also had the next morning, then we would follow up with staff and meet with them from 8 until 12, whatever. And then we drive to the next place. So we hit all 7 regions. Every region had a different topic, different point that they were concerned about. But it was interesting to hear from the public. And the thing that was really interesting to me was that during the days and meeting with the staff is to reassert that this whole change with the reorganization and this management, this change to Parks and Recreation and taking care of managing the resource is being built from the ground up. We've got the kind of the sideboard set up, and now we're asking the staff to say, what is the most effective? What's the best way to do this? And we're trying to get the buy-in from them to build this from the ground up. They're the ones that live this every day. We don't. So we're trying to get them to, come with these concepts, bring it forward to us, put it together, come up with a good plan. So we've got Hope and her staff as lead on this, and I think we're going to make some really, really good changes. And the other thing I push when I'm out there, a couple other things is, one is I believe that we're a one organization. We are FWP. We're not Region 1, we're not Region 2, we're not parks, we're not wildlife, we're not fisheries. We are FWP. And no person's job is more important or less important than anybody else there. We all have jobs to do, and we need to work together to be effective. And I'm really trying to instill that understanding that we have to have a strong team to survive and all these things that are being thrown at us constantly. The other thing I talked about too was the public trust doctrine. And what I've realized with working with the department for many years and working with the legislatures, there's really a lack of understanding with the public and the people within the department of what our roles are in the department. And if you're familiar with the public trust doctrine, what that basically says is we have trustees, we have trust managers, and we have trust beneficiaries. The trust could be the wildlife, could be the parks, could be different things. But we have the trustees, those are the ones that are making the decisions basically. Those are the voted officials, the legislature, the people appointed like the board, commission, the governor voted in. And then we have the trust managers who are basically the staff. And our role is to provide the best information for the trustees to make informed decisions. Once those decisions are made, we then implement them and enforce them. And that's all for the benefit of the public. So I hear a lot of people saying, well, can the department do this? Can the department do that? I'm trying to get people to understand they have more power out there than I do. And than anybody in the department does. They need to talk to their legislators, they need to talk to the board members, commissioners, and get their point across and do it through public comment and other ways. So once again, the role of the department is to enact whatever laws are passed and enforce them, and just give the best information we can to the decision makers. So that's about all I have, other than I really, really enjoy the job and look forward to working with you guys for a long time. So.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Warsack. The next item is the Summers Beach Dynamic Beach Project. And Hope Stockwell, Fish, Wildlife and Parks Outdoor Recreation Administrator, will present this next agenda item.
Good afternoon, everyone. Colleen is coming around with some photos that will help us take a look at what we're talking about here with this dynamic beach project. For the record, again, Hope Stockwell. I'm the administrator of the newly configured Parks and Outdoor Recreation Division. Very glad to be here, and just want to thank the staff that's done yeoman's work getting us to this point with Summers Beach. We have some really exciting news today. As of today, Summers Beach is officially ours. The acquisition was completed, and there's a whole host of folks who have been involved in making that happen. And I want to give them a little shout out. We were joking that maybe we should have brought the cowbell in to ring a little bit because this has been a huge undertaking for staff. And so we want to give thanks to not only those in the Parks and Outdoor Recreation Division who've been working on this, but also the individual staff there in Region 1 who've been so involved, the director's office, the legislature, also down in finance, the claims, the budget folks, the financial assistance and compliance bureau, the legal folks, our lands bureau, design and construction, the MEPA team in Region 1. There has just been a ton of people involved, and then also really wanting to thank the Parks and Outdoor Recreation Board, who was instrumental in making the decisions on the approval and the acquisition. So just lots of congratulations to go around on making this happen, and it is officially ours as of this morning. So want to shout that out loud and clear, and then also to thank the partners in the area that have been working with us outside of the agency. We've had a number of folks. Obviously, the Slider family deserves a huge thank you in all of this. The family from whom the land was acquired in working with us so generously in that. Also, the Flathead Land Trust and the State Parks Foundation have been instrumental. They've been doing a lot of fundraising for us to go in hand with the acquisition to help us operations and maintenance costs at the site. There's some work to be done here, and we're going to start talking about that today, the things that need to happen. but they have raised an incredible amount of money along with the matching grant from the Slider family. I think in the neighborhood of about $250,000 all told now. And that's just an incredible resource to help get this park going. And so we couldn't be more grateful here. Just want everyone to know that. Taking a look at the site itself, the cover sheet in front of you, we're calling this the Dynamic Beach Project. It's really about erosion control. And the way that Flathead, because of the decades of dam operation and that full pool water level being maintained for extended periods, you've got the water slamming up against the shoreline repeatedly. And the way that energy gets dispersed in different areas based on what that area particularly looks like can really cause some damage on the shoreline. And so this project is aimed at helping do better erosion control on this land that's now ours to steward. And the way that this Dynamic Beach Project works, the goal is to stop the loss of the existing shoreline, but also create some more habitat that's going to parlay right into that wetland area that's there. It's going to provide sort of this neutral transition zone and be kind of a shock absorber. And some of the pictures that have come around, Colleen passed out. There's one with 4 photos there, gives you a sense of what's going to be underneath that dynamic beach. But this is a photo of some log and gravel road that was constructed on the lake bed when they did the Osprey landing. And this is on the west side of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service property there near Big Fork. And so you bring in these big logs. They're talking in this case, it would be about 256-inch diameter logs as a base. And then you're placing over that the washed rock and gravel and sand. And the way that this works is it becomes, instead of just the water slamming right into the shoreline and having that lateral movement of energy, it sort of creates this ripple where the water can come in and kind of break up that force. And someone described it as acting like a beanbag of sorts. It absorbs some of that energy and kind of does this. This is the best technical description I have right here, is helping absorb that energy and pass it along so it's not as damaging to the shoreline. But on the back side of that is the 3 photos. On the top left, you have what the shoreline looks like now in a particular section, section 1, and we can look more at the map on the cover sheet in relation to that. And on the right side is a different part of Flathead Lake over on the east side, north of Finley Point State Park and south of the biological station, where they've done this same work. The same contractor that we're looking to work with has done this work. And that's the goal, is what it would look like in the future, and this representation on the bottom of how that would be built up. But it just, in addition to being better for the habitat and helping with the wetlands and the wildlife using those wetlands, but also really creates a nice beachfront for the public to use and recreate on as well. So lots of ways to win with that project. We do have a new cost estimate in that it's about $565,000 for all of the work. We are in conversations with Burlington Northern Santa Fe because of the inholdings that they have in the property about how we can work with them and potentially partner for the access for the work that we need to do on the beachfront. And so I think Colleen also handed this map out to you of the whole property. Everybody have that in front of them. So just want to point out the 2 BNSF properties are we're calling this upper rectangle here the North 40, and that also is going to have a really important component here potentially at the park. We'll talk about that in just a minute, but down here in this southern piece is called the Swamp Pond. That is where we have the Superfund area that goes back to the work that BNSF had there with the wood and tie treatment facility. And I think it was declared a Superfund in '84 around those parts, but there's still, concerns there environmentally. And so not disturbing that area. It's been remediated to some degree over time. And there's a hardened beachfront there to protect the water, but still not wanting to disturb that. But what we're hoping is there's an access road that comes around that swamp pond. So if you look on the map on your cover sheet, this prettier watercolor type one, the swamp pond is this sort of black spot here. And on that north and east side of it, you see that access road. And we're hoping that we can work out an opportunity with BNSF to use that road to get right down to the beach area to work on this dynamic beach project. The alternative to that, if we're not able to work that out, is we have to come in further to the east And it's not shown on this representation, but we would build a short temporary road, but it would be across some wetlands. And we can mitigate for that, but we would rather not do that. So we're really hoping that we're going to be able to work out the agreement with BNSF to access the beachfront over by the swamp pond, as it's known. And then also potentially do some work to further armor that swamp pond area and work on the beachfront in front of it as well. So our legal team is working on that negotiation process. And if you decide to move forward with the project, we would continue to pursue that. So want to let you know about that piece of it. But where we're at, so with the acquisition being finalized in the last couple of days here, this is the next step in terms of helping to really be a good steward of the property. We also have, not in front of you today, but another next step there is that we're working on what are the interim amenities at the park site. And so we can be good neighbors with this new property. And we know that it's an important public use area. They're used to using it. It's been temporarily closed this season while we're going through the acquisition process. But now that it's ours, it's expected that the public will start using it again. And so we have a proposal that we're working on with a draft environmental assessment to be released very shortly. In fact, I think later today, putting out our proposal for what could be interim amenities there at the site. We will get into a much broader future master plan kind of look at what's really this park going to become. But we need to do something in the meantime, and that's why we're calling these interim amenities. What you'll see on the property as we've proposed in the draft EA when it comes out, and you will get a copy of that as soon as it becomes publicly available. But what you'll see is on that North 40, our preferred action is to put in a 72 stall parking lot. It would be right off Summers Road and help control the public access. Right now, there's been an issue with people backing up and parking on the road and causing problems for congestion and neighbors and whatnot. And so by doing this with the preferred action, having some parking built here in this North 40, and we did just hear today, actually it was yesterday, I think, that we have secured the lease with BNSF for use of this North 40 for that purpose. And so there are some other pieces to fall into place. We do need to bring that back in front of the board, we think, to just have a final approval on that lease agreement. It was definitely discussed as part of the acquisition process. We're checking with legal right now as to whether it does need to come back in front of you formally for a sign off. I guess what I'm saying is it shouldn't be a surprise to you that we're looking at this area, but we may have to bring it back in front of you again. And we would do that probably before your December meeting if we need to through a Zoom meeting, just so we can finish that and get to work on these interim amenities. We'll have to keep you posted on that, though. I'm sorry, I don't have a final answer for you on that right now. But other things that would be happening up there with the interim amenities, we'd have some porta potties, there'd be signage, there'd be some minimal trail starts, to a minimal footprint while we're working on that longer term planning process for what the park is going to become in the future. But just to help control some of the public use and putting out the message that please be kind to the site as we work on its future and develop it. We're going to take lots of public input, have lots of public meetings on all of this, and get public comment on how best to develop, but we also want to be good stewards in the meantime. So you'll see that coming out in that draft EA very soon. Today in front of you, though, taking us back to this dynamic beach project, we need your approval to move forth with the project because it's more than $50,000. And so that's where we are today, Mr. Chairman, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Hope. Thank you, Hope. Does any of the board members have questions for?
Do Chairman Kip, if I may, just a question. You've done quite a bit of fundraising, obviously, to get this thing kickstarted a little bit. Will any of the monies, the $250,000 that have been raised to date, go to help offset the total cost of the $565,000?
Mr. Chair and Member McLean, no. The intention, this money for this project was built into the appropriation from the legislature. Okay. They gave us a nice budget for it, knowing that we were going to have some of these costs like this. There's also a lot of cleanup work to be done on the park, removing of old fence and debris and things like that. The money that's been donated is anticipated to help with operations and maintenance, and to help really kickstart this park and get it into the shape and design that it needs to be.
Thank you for explaining that.
Any other questions from board members?
Mr. Chairman, thanks for kind of clarifying some of these issues and some of the things around this park. With the improvements to the beach that we're looking at today, do you have maybe a timeline that you're thinking? In other words, are we going to maybe get some of the major stuff handled so it would be ready for visitors by the hot weather next summer? What's your wishes and what do you think is reality?
Sure. Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair Kip, and also Member Loomis. Great point. I totally missed talking about that. So the timeline is that we're trying to stockpile the materials around the ground freeze. We have some permitting hoops that need to be jumped through if you approve this today. And so the goal is to have all the permits issued to FWP by January, February, so that construction can proceed. And they think that the actual construction will take about 3 weeks to complete. So we anticipate having this ready to go for the peak season next year.
No, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? Vice Chair Mo.
On the North 40, how big is that?
Mr. Chair, members, let me think on that for a second. I'm not sure how the parking lot itself is like 1.2 acres, that proposal, but the North 40 itself, I'm not sure of the acreage. Does anybody know that offhand? I have the lease sitting in my pile, but
It's all
I can
right,
look through it.
Mr. Chair, and Hope, all I'm concerned about is whether the parking is adequate. How many vehicles, because one of the big sources of public comment, and if you've been in that area during the summer, is the parking is just atrocious right along. What is that? Is that Highway
Summers
93?
Road there. Mhm.
All along that area and into Summers Road. So it's a big problem. And the next question I have is, I think from reading the materials, the indication was that this gravel beach, or what's it called? The dynamic
Beach.
is going to be about 200 feet.
Mr. Chair and Madam Vice Chair, we're looking at about 6,000 feet of shoreline.
Okay, I don't know where I read that 200. But what I see is on this map is that it seems to stretch from 1 to 5 about. Is that the 6,000 feet that you're talking about?
I believe so, Madam Chair. I'll turn around to Randy, but you got that right? Yeah. So the full project is the 6,000 feet. There's a recreational beach section, which might be that smaller number that caught your eye somewhere. But if you look, so if you match these two things up, I was having to wrestle my eyeballs around this earlier. So where the swamp pond is, we'll have some work here to the left of it, or I guess that'd be the southwest of it. And then the majority of it is going to occur to the north and east of it. So that's the longer stretch, but it's the full property shoreline that is part of our property.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, Hope, I have a couple. The lease with the BNSF, how long of a lease is that? Is it a renewing lease, a long-term?
When I asked that question, Mr. Chair, there is not a specified term. It is until one of the parties terminates it, and there's a process by which that would occur. So I don't know that we can quite say it's in perpetuity, but that's effectively what it is.
Okay, then the next question that I have, you're building this out of wood, which will rot, and putting gravel over it. What's the life expectancy of this project?
I think, Mr. Chair, I'm going to have to turn to Randy from Design and Construction, do you have additional information you could provide? Do you want to go ahead and come forward?
Good afternoon. I'm Randy Rongley with Design and Construction. I've been working with Dr. Mark Lorang, who's associated with the biological station, and then he has his own business. He's the designer and general contractor, basically whole package for this dynamic beach. I asked him that just briefly at one point, and he said there may be a time in the future where more debris would be beneficial to be hauled in, which is great because we have a lot of debris. The minute I put the word out that we need root wads, everybody came to life. We have more root wads than we know what to do with. So, but I can't say what the lifespan would be. It would probably depend on the species and everything, but I would certainly think we'd get 20 years out of the woody debris that's going to be used to anchor. And then at that point, you know, there's just going to be a lot of interlocking of the materials anyway, once this dynamic beach has reached its basically angle of repose, or for lack of a better term.
Okay, on the page that was passed out, the Blue Bay photo, that is a completed project with this dynamic beach construction. How long has that been in place?
I can't answer that. I really don't know. I'm fairly new to Fish, Wildlife and Parks, so. And Blue Bay is a private beach anyway.
Okay, got to start somewhere, and it looks like a great start.
Well, and Mr. Chair, I think I can give you a little more context. So Senator Keenan has had this kind of work done on his property. And I have not talked to him directly about it, but read an article about the work that he had done. And I believe, my memory is a little fuzzy, but I think he said in the article, he has had to do some maintenance on the gravel with bringing some more gravel in. But there was not discussion about the underlying materials. And so we could certainly get some more information and come back to you with that, provided in an email.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Oh, but I think that I read in the article, his was done about 15 years ago.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, just a comment, that sure looks like good gravel. You know, it looks rounded and easy to walk on, attractive looking beach.
The nice washed rock that's not going to cut my 2.5-year-old's feet. Yeah.
Okay, if there are no more questions, would someone like to make a motion on the presentation given?
I'll move that the Parks and Recreation Board approve the development of a dynamic 3D beach at Summers Beach State Park contingent upon a record of decision to implement the project following the environmental analysts.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion from Member Brown and a second from Vice Chair Moe. Thanks for the motion. Now, do we have anyone in the room that would like to comment on this project? And I don't see anybody. Is there anyone on Zoom that?
No.
So we have no one on Zoom. If there's no one that would like to comment, let's vote on the motion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. So the motion passes 5-0. Thanks, Hope. Looks like you're up again.
I'm here all day, sir. There's got to be another joke I could have done better there.
No, that was a good one.
That was as far as I got. Members, again, for the record, Hope Stockwell, Administrator of the Parks and Outdoor Recreation Division. In front of you now is the discussion about the Ackley Lake State Park lease agreement with the Department of Natural Resources and Conservation. Again, Colleen is providing a little extra photography to help illustrate what's happening at this location. Ackley Lake is kind of just dead center Montana. It is about 30 miles west of Lewistown near Hobson and is a really important recreational site for folks living in that area, but people also from far away like to travel there as well. But it's a really important recreation site for that area. And we're in front of you today. We have a lease renewal for the site. We've been leasing it from DNRC since the 1960s. And as I understand it, they came to us and said, hey, there's a lot of recreation out here. We need help managing it. You guys manage recreation. Could you do this for us? And that's how we got into that relationship. And so the way that the lease has been structured, we've been doing this at no cost. They are not charging us to use the site. And because of recognition of the service we're providing for public recreation there. The change in this one, though, is that in this lease, there will be a specific reference to a designated swimming area that would be closed to motorized use. And there's been some concerns. We have a very active friends group there at Ackley Lake, and they've been looking into this, and we're concerned. Most of the kids were swimming off of the main boat ramp, which I have not been out there, but I understand is over here on this northwest side. And they were very concerned about kids and boats and congestion, and the kids like to jump off the dock there. And so could we work out a designated swimming area? And this is where we're at. This section is about 100 by 120 feet. The chairman had a question because this is an irrigation project. What happens with the drawdown and the swimming area? And the region got back to me, and I do want to thank the folks in the region who've been working hard on this. John Taylor got back to me and said that the buoys that FWP will mark the designated swim area with will be adjusted as the drawdown occurs. And so we'll just keep moving the swimming area marcation out further to answer that question. The chair had also had a question about whether there are any particular boating regulations for the lake, and there have not been, and there aren't at this time. And Mr. Taylor also said that the real concern has been with the congestion between swimming at the main dock, and they're really hoping that having this designated area is going to alleviate those safety concerns. But what you'll see in the lease that was provided to you, the new language that accounts for the swimming area is highlighted in yellow, so you can easily find it on pages 2 and 3. FWP will be responsible for the construction, operation, and maintenance of this area and marking it clearly. It's spelled out what the markers will be with the buoys, rope, et cetera. And so just wanting to point those things out to you. The other thing to know on page 3 is under the term of this lease, this will be effective until December 31st, 2024, and at which time we'll be reevaluating how it's going. Some folks have asked why such a short lease, and I think that the department has been talking about there are other leases that we have with them for which they're charging us. And so is that a policy change they want to make in this situation? And I think there are some higher level discussions happening around that. And so we just went for a shorter lease so that they could have time to think about those things, because they have a different constitutional mandate for the trust lands that they steward for the state. So just wanted to let you know what the context around that might be. And we do, I believe, have good support from the county commissioners. One of them may be joining us by Zoom, although I don't see them listed at this time. That doesn't mean they're not there. But Mr. Chair, I think I'll just stand by for any questions and public comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Hope. Does any board members have questions for Hope on this presentation?
I do.
Okay, Vice Member Mo, please.
As a non-lawyer, I just look at this lease arrangement and shake my head in befuddlement. I refer specifically to the indemnification section. It seems to me, I mean, these are two departments of the state promising not to sue each other. It's like my left hand promising my right hand that I won't cut off your finger. I mean, is this really necessary language when you're all part of the same governmental entity?
Pardon me, Mr. Chair and Madam Vice Chair, I think I will defer to Zach Zipfel, our attorney, for that question. He's joining us by Zoom.
Chairman Kip, members of the board, Zach Zipfel, legal counsel for the department. Indemnification language is pretty standard in contracts. I suppose if the board would like us to seek to remove that, we can approach DNRC with that. I think this is fairly standard language from their perspective, fairly standard language from our perspective. I think that that's not uncommon to see in contracts.
Follow up, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Is it not uncommon to see in contracts between entities of the same agency? I mean, they're
No,
both-
ma'am. No, ma'am, it is not. We're separate. We are separate departments. We still answer the governor ultimately, but that is common language in any number of contracts I've seen between state agencies.
May I ask a question also?
Yes,
Ju-
go ahead. Member
Simple
Mercer.
one, and this again is for you. Doesn't this, and maybe I just didn't understand reading this, but doesn't this take a lot of the of any liability onto Fish, Wildlife and Parks and away from Department of Natural Resources? I would think they would be really happy to let Fish, Wildlife and Parks take all of the liability issues. Or am I reading that wrong?
Members of the board, Chairman Kip, is there, was there a particular provision, or are you referring to the indemnification language?
Yeah, I was referring to the indemnity. It almost looked to me like Fish, Wildlife and Parks is not going to hold Department of DNRC liable for anything now, and where they would have been before. Isn't that correct? Or am I not reading that right?
Well, not exactly. I mean, essentially what an indemnification clause says is that each party is going to be responsible for their own liability. And it provides sort of a layer of protection for the entity that maybe is not directly involved with the conduct in question. So for example, the common kind of thing that you would see in an indemnification clause, which is what you see here, is sort of a gross negligence or willful misconduct exception, which you'll see that if you read down through there, except for DNRC's gross negligence or willful misconduct, FWP will indemnify DNRC. Sorry, I'm just reading back through this. It's been a while since I looked at it. So, I mean, essentially, in the event that unless we get to something where there is intentional misconduct on the part of DNRC, the by and large, the liability for purposes here of that public use, which is what we're there to manage on behalf of DNRC, is we're assuming the primary responsibility for that.
Thank you for explaining that.
Okay, do we have any other questions? Okay, I've got a couple. The last sheet that Colleen passed out, the swimming area, it looks to me like it's just pretty close to a boat ramp there. That's the secondary boat ramp at the lake. Does that get much use?
Mr. Chair and members, I don't know that I could quantify the use. The discussion I had previously was that there is much less use on this side because the main boat ramp is so much closer to the entrance. But I don't have a specific number for you.
Okay, the second thing that I'm wondering, okay, the Fish and Game's going to have to buy some material to construct this boundary around the swimming area. They're going to have to install it. They're going to have to occasionally move it as the water is drawn down. Any idea of costs and where will that come from?
Mr. Chair and members, that would be handled by the region. And for that question, I'm going to turn it to the Regional Park Manager, John Taylor. I feel a little bit like Vanna White. And over here on my left shoulder,
There's John.
Chairman Kipp, members of the board, Director Warsack, for the record, John Taylor, Region 4 Park Manager. To answer your question, Chairman, we really don't have a good idea of the cost yet. We haven't looked into the cost of the buoys, but we're thinking a few $1,000s probably to initially purchase those. And maintenance would be pretty much routine. We do have staff at Ackley who will be there to be available to move that as the reservoir drops.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Okay, if there are no other questions, would someone like to make a motion on this presentation?
I'm looking to find it,
What are we looking for?
the motion itself. Here it is, Your Honor, or Mr. Chairman. Long meeting. I move that the State Parks and Recreation Board approve the signature of the mutually agreed upon lease for Ackley State Park between FWP and DNRC.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair Mo. Do we have a second for that?
I'll second it.
And Member Brown will second that. Thanks for the motion and the second. Now we have time for any public comment. Is there anyone in the room that would like to comment? Seeing none, do we have anyone on Zoom that would like to comment?
There is not.
There is not.
Mr. Chairman, if I could speak to the motion before we vote. This is a good example of the kind of thing that Director Warsack was talking about in his remarks. And it's very parallel to what happened at Fort Owen. When Scott and I first started the board, those locals were pretty unhappy with what they perceived as this board's and the department's view of those particular state parks. And they got busy. And they really made a difference. And this is a good example of a group there that is in Lewistown that has just been dedicated to the state park and is just going to make it happen. And they keep making improvements in it. So this is really a step forward for them and for us, I think, as a state. So I urge your support.
Okay. So is there any other questions or comments from the board? Okay, seeing none, I'd like to take a vote on this motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, so that motion passes 5-0. Next on the agenda is issues not on the agenda. We'll take public comment for issues not on the agenda. Is there anyone in Helena or in the room that would like to comment on anything?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, it's been the first time I've had a chance to speak face-to-face with you in a year and a half. I know most of you. Kathy, I think you and I have met at some point in the tourism industry. My name is Bob Walker. I'm chair of the Montana Trails Coalition. I'm also here to represent the Montana Trails Recreation and Parks Association, which is a professional organization that represents city parks and recreation commissioners, city parks and recreation staff, and a few federal and state employees. Now, I happen to be retired. I can't say I'm professional anymore, although my wife keeps saying you're supposed to be retired, Bob. So I keep busy, but I just wanted to let you know we've worked very, very diligently over several years now supporting state parks, local parks, and recreation. And we intend to continue to do that. And we've done it very cooperatively with the State Parks and Recreation Board. And we will continue to do that. I don't think we've been at odds on anything that I can recall in the last, 12 years, maybe with the department a time or two, but with this board since its existence, we've been total cooperation. So with that, I just wanted to extend my congratulations for the new members of this board. Say hi to the ones that are still on from the past, and we'll continue to work together with you. Colleen, is it possible for me to give handouts, or do you prefer to do that? I'll give you each my card, and then I'm sorry, there's a list there of the 12 statewide and regional organizations that are represented on the board of the Montana Trails Coalition, because I think you'll find it interesting. It's truly a coalition of the entire trails community in Montana. And I hate to say it this way, but you'll see the list. It ranges from the Montana Wilderness Association to the Montana Trail Vehicle Riders Association. And so it's, we're there working hard for you, and we've had some pretty good success, I think, in the last 5 years. With that, thank you very much. I'm sorry? Oh, okay.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else in the room that would like to comment about anything that was not on today's agenda? And how about anybody from Zoom? Hope?
Mr. Chair, members, this is a little irregular, but I would like to do it in the formal part of the meeting. The National Association of State Park Directors issued a formal commendation at its most recent meeting in Pennsylvania that Beth Shoemate, Charlie Sperry, and I were all able to attend together. It was my 4th day on the job. And but I really want to recognize what they said about our extraordinary state park employees. And so their commendation was in recognition of their service, their dedication, and their perseverance across the nation during the COVID-19 pandemic. And so we here at FWP want to extend our heartfelt gratitude to everyone working in our state park system. And of course, we have many recreational sites with lots of employees working hard across the state. But I particularly wanted to point out this commendation from the National Association for our state park employees and thank them and their families for their dedicated service and commitment to this state. Thank you.
Thank you. That's it for commenters. Then does anybody from the board have anything they'd like to add? Okay, then that'll conclude today's meeting. Our next board meeting will be scheduled for December 9th. And I believe that's going to be a Zoom meeting. But we don't know. Okay. All right, so that'll conclude the meeting, and we'll take a short break and then come back for the work session. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
All right, we'll get into the work session. First thing on that is the department reorganization.
Mr. Chairman, the board, I'll just, Hank Warsack, I'll just give you a high level, then I'm probably gonna turn it over to Hope. Because I've basically put her in charge of doing this whole thing, and she's doing a great job. So the whole idea behind this, this idea to come up with, to separate this out and put a Parks and Recreation Board was to take care of the resources we have and fishing accesses, these sites, the wildlife management area, the parks, different things. We had a lot of people doing maintenance that were passing each other on the road. We had areas where we had 3 backhoes, one for fisheries, one for parks, and one for wildlife, and in the same, in the same maintenance buildings. So the idea was to try to figure out a way to do this and be more efficient and more effective. And with understanding that with the change in Montana and people are discovering it and moving more and more to it, the recreation is hoping everybody can attest to in parks has gone through the roof on visitation. So it's no more just the hunting and fishing part, but it is hunting, fishing, and recreation, parks and recreation. So we wanted to focus on expanding that, and that's why we put the emphasis on this. So as I indicated, when we did around the state tour, as I talked to staff, I explained to them what the decision has been made that we're going to break into this, but how we're going to do it, what it's going to look like is going to be based on a lot of their input and brought from the bottom up and what's the best way to do this, because they're the experts on the field, on the ground, that see this every day. And, just look at some ways of using manpower in a better way and actually trying to make things more challenging for people to do and enjoy what they're doing a lot more. So I don't know what else I should add to that, Hope. Other than, I'm really looking forward to it. The way we laid it out, the governor was obviously in favor. He signed off on it. And we're looking forward to doing some really good things. And as it's sinking in with people, they're starting to realize that this is a good move forward. And we'll take care of more than just the animals as a resource, but the lands and the parks and everything else. So it's all in one group. That's why I said we are FWP. It's one solid agency of everything that we do. So that's kind of a 30,000 foot level look at why I did what I did. So go ahead, Hope.
I'll take it away then. So if he's 30,000 feet, I don't know how far in the weeds you want to get, but I'll try and get you somewhere in the middle. Not too far, not too close, not too high. So coming back, maybe the first thing to talk about is what's in the newly configured division, to just be clear on that. So we've got all the administration, operations, and maintenance for state parks and fishing access sites. We're also going to be doing all land and water recreation management. So that includes recreation on wildlife management areas. We also are in charge of maintenance for the wildlife management areas, but not the habitat functions. And that's going to be part of where we get into this deep work this fall and winter about how to suss those things out. And more on that in a minute. Other things that are in the division, we have all the hunting, fishing, access, and other recreational access programs, including block management, and then all of our existing trail grant programs, and then which is the recreational trails pieces, the OHV, the snowmobiles, they're with us. We have made a couple of changes. The Land and Water Conservation Fund grant program has moved into our Financial Assistance Bureau. They're going to be handling the details of that, but we'll still be engaged with the advisory committees and whatnot. River recreation management is definitely part of us. It's coming. We haven't made the full transition there yet. An example would be the Madison River Work Group is still with the Fisheries Division, Charlie Sperry, and this is a great time to make some introductions here. I'm sorry that I haven't done this. So here with me today, I want to introduce two integral people to helping make all this happen. So Beth Shoemate and Charlie Sperry. You know Beth well. Some of you know Charlie already or are getting to know him. They will be the assistant administrators for the division and are integral with this reorg work and everything else day to day that we're doing. And so I really want to thank them for the awesome work they've been doing, not only in helping me get up to speed, but just there's a ton of work to be done, and they're helping bear that burden. And I'm very grateful to have them as sort of our leadership triangle is the way I'm describing it. So Charlie has some river rec chops that he built over the years doing other work in the agency, and we're going to rely on those as we move back into river recreation management. And he is shadowing the Madison River Work Group and will be part of our transition into taking over those types of projects. But for now, that one, for instance, is staying with fisheries. There's a lot of discussion about what river recreation looks like in the new division configuration, and that ties in with what does the habitat pieces look like versus the maintenance pieces? What are we responsible for? What might the biologists be responsible for? And we're going to get into a deep discussion this fall and winter about where that regional framework lies, what work people are doing, who's doing it, et cetera. But more on that in a minute. So taking a look at the division structure at headquarters, we're looking right now at 3 bureaus. The Visitor Services Bureau, which would have our interpretation and education programs, our volunteer programs, including AmeriCorps and the camp hosts, the enterprise and retail program. Some of you were speaking with Shanae Strobel out in the lobby this morning. Great work she's doing with our retail products. Also the reservation system, which Shanae handles, permitting, concessionaire contracts, visitor use data collection, which really helps us inform our management of sites and how we build out in the future. And then also administrative and seasonal rulemaking will likely be in the Visitor Services Bureau, but we're still sort of feeling that out. The second bureau would be the Stewardship Bureau, which is my term. This is a name that I've come up with and Hank is letting me stick with, and I appreciate that. Everything we do at FWP is stewardship, it just is. But this bureau particularly is focused on the land stewardship, the resource stewardship. We're going to have under that umbrella, the maintenance, capital projects. We're going to have the asset and facility management, heritage resources, and the acquisition and lease management. I should preface this by saying none of this is set in stone yet, but this is where we're headed. And then the third bureau is the Access and Landowner Relations Bureau, likely to include, again, all those hunting, fishing, recreation access programs that we already have, especially our flagship, the block management program, recreation management of all types, including river recreation, and then the trail planning, coordination, collaboration, and grant administration that we do. We really want to build out that trail work and work more concertedly with partners to coordinate across jurisdictions and land types. It's been pointed out to me, we don't have a statewide trail map that's been updated since the early 2000s. And so that's something we'd like to build into that bureau's work in updating that. And trails are really important. The Parks and Focus Commission had worked with UM's ITRR, the Norma Nickerson data collection group, and Norma's retired now, but they put together a survey at gas stations. What residents want from their state parks? 90%, whether they're overnight or day users, want trails. That's pretty loud and clear. And then down, I think it was more like 13% wanted Wi-Fi and connectivity. So that kind of gives us a spectrum of, there are lots of things in between there, but you know, people are really wanting to get outside, and that trails piece, we're very convinced we can bolster that and there's lots more great work to do in connectivity between our sites and other sites, and looking at concepts. You know, there in the last 2 legislatures been talk about an east-west bike trail across Montana or biking opportunities. And so that's the sort of things that we're looking to really build, and Beth Shoemate's going to be taking the leads on those discussions. Also, under the Access and Landowner Relations Bureau, again, landowner relations, whether that's with private landowners or other public agencies, with tribal nations, interjurisdictional relationships are going to fall in there. That's where we're looking at in Helena. Out in the region, at the regional level, boots on the ground, we're doing a couple of different things. As Hank said, in the division, we're unifying the maintenance functions, but at the regional level, we're elevating them to a degree. There is going to be a regional maintenance manager for each region, and they will be separate from the wildlife, the fisheries, and the parks and outdoor recreation divisions. They'll have equal standing with those three managers at the regional level, and they're going to report directly to the regional supervisor. And the idea behind that is A, maintenance is just that important, but B, also not housing maintenance under one of the three divisions, particularly so someone doesn't feel like they're being shorted. The regional supervisor will be the direct supervisor to this person so that they can mediate any issues between prioritization, for instance, between site types, divisions, et cetera. And so just want to point that out. The other thing that's happening at the regional management level is right now we have our regional park managers, some of whom you're very familiar with. Their jobs are going to be changing a bit. And we're working on that position description right now, what that's going to look like. We had a work group meeting on Wednesday morning, but that position is going to become something akin to a regional park and recreation manager. They'll have state parks. Everything that's in the division, except for maintenance, is going to be in their purview. So it's state parks, fishing access sites, recreation on wildlife management areas, river recreation, the access programs. So the scope of their job is really broadening. And then between those regional positions, this fall, when the director and others from the director's office were out on those regional tours, they talked to staff and really made a commitment to working with staff and building what this regional framework under these management positions looks like, how the positions shake out, who's working for whom, who's doing what work, really made a commitment to building that from the ground up. And so we've had already some steps in that, just taking general feedback on what are your ideas for that? What could that look like? Been a lot of ideas and discussion at the maintenance level and rethinking how maintenance is handled maybe in a geographic region instead of by site type, for instance, so we don't have people passing each other. There's conversation about we have some folks with some real specialty skills, woodworking, metal fabrication, those sorts of things, heritage preservation. Can we build maybe strike teams, specialized strike teams of types that could be moved out across the state to help lead regional efforts of specific kinds based on the type of special project it is? And there are lots of ideas flowing. We are looking for innovation, outside of the box thinking as we set this up. So one of the next steps, primary steps, is establishing a work group that will be made up of people from across the state. So representing all the regions as well as headquarters, representing the different jobs types, and sort of hashing this out. What could this look like? And a lot of the concern comes in that we have people wearing multiple hats in the jobs that they're in. We have maintenance workers that are also doing some habitat things. We have habitat people also doing some maintenance things on park sites. Who is the caretaker reporting to? Is it the regional maintenance manager? Or is it the regional park and recreation manager? Because, things just for like stocking the toilets and needing to know which sites need the most immediate attention. And then the maintenance manager is dealing with broader maintenance issues. We're going to have some really detailed and possibly hard discussions. We also expect things to come to light where we have two different classifications of workers doing similar jobs, and maybe some not being paid the same for the same kind of work. And so we expect to look at those things as well and make sure that everybody's on par with each other for the type of work that they're doing. Change is always uncomfortable, and there is concern from folks not knowing exactly what their job's going to look like in the coming months and how things might change. And we're just trying to be thoughtful in communicating with people about just where we're at. We're sending out all employee emails at this time every couple of weeks, trying to just give people the latest so that they don't have to sit and wonder what the heck's going on right now. Even if we don't have a lot of change yet to inform them about at times, just keeping them abreast of what the discussions are, but also providing opportunities for them to provide input beyond email exchange. That's a really big overview. Do you have any questions at this time about that? Or Director, do you have anything you'd want to add?
No, I think you've covered it pretty good, Hope. The only thing that I may add is part of the reason that we're doing this and we're having the maintenance people keep track of their time right now is we want to set be able to set a rate. This is something Deputy Director Temple come up with an idea is that I can't even think of what we call it
The
now.
proprietary fund.
Yeah, proprietary fund. So what we do, we set this, and it's always a problem trying to get FTE from the legislature and trying to examine what this does. But the way this is set up, if we monitor this, we can tell what we need. It's a lot easier for us to get additional FTE in the future to meet the needs for the department. So it's part of the reason behind this too. And that's why they're capturing their hours right now, breaking it down. So we can use that for the next 2 years to go to the proprietary fund in the next session.
And the way that's working is they're doing these maintenance logs in the field. So maintenance keeping track of what kind of work are they doing, how long are they doing it, and reporting it back into headquarters, which is doing data analysis, looking at, well, okay, how much time are we spending on these specific functions? What does that actually cost us in terms of, the employee cost and other equipment, rolling that up into a rate that gets charged to the site or the budget that the maintenance was done for, so that everyone's paying their fair share as well. But once you can build that rate, that ties into, we're charging the different budgets that rate, and we're building a case for, okay, we need more maintenance over here, and we can see that need based on the data that we've collected. The old saying, you can't manage it if you don't measure it. And then there are some great tools in that proprietary fund once you've built that to make hiring a little easier if you find you've got a spot you need to fill.
So maintenance is a huge item. I mean, it could be working on parking lots. It could be just mowing the grass at a fishing access site. Fishing access sites are paid for, some of it, through outfitters buying launch permits to use that. But there are a lot of people that use a fishing access site that really don't pay anything. I mean, are you looking into how do you generate more money to take care of these things?
Mr. Chair, that's a really good point. A real good point. It's something that we've looked at the last couple of sessions, and there's been bills in there to try to get people to pay for this in the form of at least having a conservation license. So both those bills have been shot down, but I imagine it will come up again. Because there's got to be a way of balancing it out. The way I explained it is like for a fishing access site, 3/4 of one of those trees is filled up by people that don't pay a dime to be there. So how do we balance that out? And I think people are willing to pay. We just got to find out a mechanism to do that, because as we see more and more use coming. How do we take care of that to make sure that we can meet the needs and keep, like you said, it mowed, the parking lots up, all that stuff. So when you look at maintenance across the department, I mean, we've got fence building, we've got, a ton of stuff that we do that, that just has to be done. Weeds, all that stuff like that.
I was, Mr. Chair, asking Beth to refresh my memory. There were some use surveys done at fishing access sites, and we're recollecting it was about 55% was non-angler use at the sites that were surveyed. So it's a big component.
Some fishing access sites, if there's very little fishing.
Is your microphone on, sir? I'm sorry.
The Cellway fishing access site in Dillon is 10-to-1 non-fishermen all the time. That's right next to town. It's always full of people, and yet not really getting much money there.
That's once again, that is one of the issues we have to look at. We have to look at what is a fishing access designed for, and what are they morphed into, and then different ones. We have some that have camping at them, some do not. Different things like that. We've got, it all depends on what side of the fence you're on and what you think it should be used for. But we've had people say that you shouldn't have kids at a fishing access site. It should be just for boat launch, and that's all it should be. So there's always three sides of every story, I say, my side, your side of truth. We need to figure out where to balance this out and understand recreation is going to be demanded no matter what we do. And maybe we do separate some fishing access sites that are truly just for launch sites. And don't call them fishing access sites, call them a launch site, and a different cost for a different thing. So, I mean, that's the challenges for the department for the future.
Okay, thank you.
And really will play into our planning discussion. We'll talk more about planning here in a little bit, but those are certainly considerations as we're looking at our planning.
Well, I just wanted to thank you and the director and your office, at FWP for their work and to look at these issues. Sometimes you can get kind of stuck in a rut, and it's to look at and see times are changing, things are changing, things are more expensive, more people are coming, all these things, and say, is there a better way we can do this? So I appreciate your work on that.
I second that, and I'd like to say thank you for including the efficiencies, identifying efficiencies throughout the system that can be put right into the structure as well as the organization. That's good.
Well, Mr. Chairman, one of the things that Dustin Temple and I had talked about is how do you run a business without knowing what your expenses are? So this, to me, I look at this as like it's a business, and how do we balance it out, make sure we take care of things the right way.
And timeline, just to let you know, we're really on a push to make many of these changes and have that regional framework sorted out in time for peak season next year. People are going to be hiring seasonals early next year starting. And so we want to have these things hammered out in time for that to show demonstrable change in that season, but also in advance, have a season under our belt as we head into the next legislature. So we understand, well, how's this working? Do we have resource needs that we need to make requests for, so that we have a season under our belt so we can talk to the legislature about, okay, here's the new shape of things, and we have reorganized to be more efficient, and this is what it looks like right now, and we have these pinch points, or we've made these efficiencies. We're not sure exactly how it's going to shake out, but I imagine there are going to be some pinch points as we work through this, and so we want to be sure to have that and experience solid to report back to the legislature in 23. Moving on to Hell Creek, sir.
Yeah, just present. If we have questions, we'll just ask. So Hell Creek then is the next thing.
Well, Hell Creek is moving along, as I think at a pretty good pace. We got the MOU signed with a Little Shell. We've got it worked out with the Corps of Engineers to get them to work out. They're going to have to basically go out for a lease agreement, the Little Shell is, and then we're going to end up turning it over to them. But we're also set up for transition and showing them the Little Shell how to take care of things. So what is it, October 13th?
Yeah, next week. But
Next week, we're going to get out and show them how to shut things down and winterize and do things like that. So it's, and everybody here has done a Herculean effort to get this done. It's, there's a lot of unknowns. Nobody's ever done this before. How do we do this? And I got to say, cooperation in all groups has been very, very good to get it done. And I think it just needed to get down and just really have a common goal and try to work through that. So I'll leave the details once again up to Hope on this thing, but I am pleased with where it's heading. And I think we will, with your grace, we'll be out of this by next year. And hopefully that I truly believe that this will be good for the people of Montana and how it's going to be taken care of.
So we have a timeline on that. And
We're working on a timeline.
We'll be good.
Yeah, we got, what do we have, the extra 2 years on the lease? But we've got.
Yeah, we do have 2 1-year options on, but we're really hoping to assign the lease to the Little Shell and have that decision in front of you for your December board meeting. We are pushing. There are some steps to get that to happen, but one of the pieces is that we're working on a third-party agreement. Zach Sipfel is drafting the language for turning over the reservation system for the campground for next season to the Little Shell come November 1st, when that typically opens up to start making reservations for next season. And campground responsibilities also in that third-party agreement. But it's our intention that we're going to push to get this lease assignment in front of you for the December meeting. Yeah, and the chair had asked specifically, so there are a couple of capital project things going out there, and the chair, Hank, had specifically asked about the low water boat ramp gravel project to harden the surface. So the water is so low right now, the boats are going way down, and that surface just needs more gravel to be hardened so that we're not putting deep ruts and whatnot into the soil as it's being used more and more, because the water is expected to remain low for a while. And so we've gone through the process of seeking the 404 permit from the Army Corps of Engineers. There's a nationwide maintenance permit under which this work fits. So it's a shorter process. They expedited the review of the permit, and we have the permit approved just in the last couple of days. I'm sort of losing track of time in my head, but it's very recent. And now we're going to be talking the director's office with the Little Shell what the next steps are on how the work actually gets done. So the second piece is that there's a fuel tank that needs shored up that is on the concessionaire's responsibility. And the Little Shell are working with the concessionaire to put together the technical specs for the work that needs done, the retaining block that needs to go in to shore up the structure around there. And the Corps has made some requests for some specific documents, and the Little Shell are working with the concessionaire to get the Corps what it needs. Any questions on that?
One question, there was some questions early with a permit for an outfitter to operate. There, everything happened and they were able to operate this season?
There was, yes, it took getting sorry, go ahead, Director. Beth can probably speak more accurately to it, but eventually there was a delay, and you heard discussion of that at the May meeting, people's concerns about getting going for the season, but ultimately, yes.
They did get up and going for the season. Okay, thank you.
And I just want to say how pleased I am with the helpful attitude and approach that the department has shown in this. It's easy to just hand something over to people and say, it's your responsibility now. And I really hope that we continue to do everything we can to make sure it's a successful transition.
Well, it's been nice to have the opportunity to continue working with Chairman Gray, since I worked with him on the State Tribal Relations Committee too. So he's actually speaking in front of the State Tribal Relations Committee today in Great Falls. So we swapped meetings here.
Nice.
Moving on to the planning discussion. So you all had some specific updates that you were interested in, and I think we're going to start with sort of discussion on where we're going with planning from here in the new division. As you've already touched on, there are lots of considerations. It's who's helping pay for the work, who's a paying constituent and who is not, and where that discussion goes in the future. But thinking the approach here in the newly configured division and the direction from the director's office is being more global in our planning processes. And the director's office would really like to get us to a regional recreation planning scope, so that we're looking at this region by region. There may be subunits. There's been a suggestion managing recreation, in particular watershed, for instance, is a specific geographic area. More of that sort of larger focus rather than site by site, taking the big picture and working together. It ties into the maintenance about how we're sharing maintenance, but it also ties into being consistent across site types. One of the things that Charlie Sperry is tasked with tying into is a departmental effort that was already underway under the governor's red tape initiative to bring more consistency to our regulations for use and making sure they're consistent and whether there needs to be any sort of changes. Charlie, I've asked him to take a particular look across site types to make sure that we can build consistency, for instance, with camping between FASs and state parks. What are the rules? Are they the same? The day periods that you can stay in one spot, et cetera, with the idea being that if you have consistency in the rules and regulations, the visitors can be better visitors and better stewards of the site. If they're not confused about now, where am I and what are the rules and how long can I be and what am I supposed to be doing? Let's be as consistent as possible. And so our first look at this planning effort is let's get consistent across our rule types for use. The second step of that is going to be, let's get consistent with our fees for the types of use. We have some camping on fishing access sites that requires a fee, but the fees are different than state parks. And we're looking also, as you're well aware, with the fee rulemaking process for state parks, it's an every 2-year process the department goes through, and looking with an eye for the next fee cycle, we're going to be setting for the 2023 season, which actually comes up really fast. We have to have those decisions going by June next year so they can be plugged into our reservation system and ready in time for when reservations start hitting in August and November for 2023. So it's much faster than I thought it was going to be. But that will be the second piece, is looking at consistency in fees across site types, but also looking at dynamic fee schedules potentially, paying more for more services, electrical water hookups, paying less for more primitive experiences, but still being consistent across those site types for each of those. So we'll be taking a big look at that. And we do appreciate the policy that the board enacted, giving us the sideboards for that, being sure to have public comment, a robust public comment opportunity, et cetera, and not pricing Montanans out. Looking at those dynamic pricing options. So we'll be taking that policy very much to heart as we go into that. The other thing just with planning, so thinking more geographically about planning, but also taking a whole look at the state, thinking about the diversity of opportunities across the state, ADA being one of those, looking for opportunities for helping underserved folks better get out into the field, whether it's ADA or I have a particular heart for underserved kids, which I kind of got with my state tribal relations work. And there are some ideas out there how we can better partner with foster programs, for instance, to get more foster youth out there, kids of incarcerated parents. So just thinking holistically, planning not just about site development, that sort of thing, but also about our interpretation and our programs that we're offering. It's a very high level look, but we're going to be kind of rethinking this. Cayenne Bishop is our planner, and she has put together a document for me like, okay, I need to get my head wrapped around our global planning world, because we're bringing in the recreation at FAS and wildlife management areas. So these are the specific projects we know over here. Let's get those just on paper so I can see where they all are, where the bodies are, and what we need to work on. And then over here, working on how are we going to tackle this in an efficient, thoughtful way, because we don't have endless planning resources. We just don't. And maybe that ends up being one of the asks we make down the road. But right now, we just need to figure out how are we going to approach this, but also taking in the regional considerations and ideas for this. Again, that watershed concept for recreational management coming out of Region 2 right now, maybe doing a pilot with that and looking, okay, how does that work? Is that something we could really move forward with? So lots of questions around that. That's the global level. Tying into that is more surveys and getting a better understanding of our visitor use with the traffic counters that have been going in at many sites. A lot of our increased visitation last year was because of COVID response, but also partly because we're counting better now, because we've undergone a very specific effort to get more counters out on our trails and at our sites to see how many people really are coming. And so again, can't manage it if you don't measure it. That will help inform our planning as well. These specific sites that you all have asked for updates on were touched on at your May meeting as well. Let's start with the Smith River State Park Planning Report. And I'm going to defer to Vice Chair Mo to start, since you're on the advisory committee there, and report out on your experience at the last meeting. And then I can follow up with a little bit of the staff effort that's gone on since then.
I asked the chair's indulgence to talk to you from the podium because it's a little awkward to report out that way. I don't know, have all of you been on the Smith River? Because it's hard to understand it unless you've really been on it. It's really, I think, the jewel of the state park system. And I think it's maybe the only state park that really funds itself. But it's extremely popular. And in fact, in the past 3 years, partly because of what Hope has just said, that we're counting better, but also it continues a trend that's been going on for at least 10 years. The number of floaters on the Smith has risen dramatically. And in fact, in the past 3 years, it's up 25%. And whenever you have that level of usage, you have that level of impact. And so the department has called together a group to deal with some issues that just can't be put off any longer. And they are relying on the expertise of a group that has been around for quite some time, the Smith River Advisory Council. So there are some key members of that group that involves users of the Smith, landowners on the Smith, and Forest Service and outfitter kinds of groups. And also included on this panel are the Forest Services on it. About, I think, maybe 18% of the land along the Smith River is United States Forest Service. So it's a complex management issue in itself. But what the group is looking at is coming to you probably in December with a proposal for the environmental assessment. Is that the right way to put that? The draft and environmental analysis. Thank you. And so we've been looking at those issues and how we will put those out to the public so that you have the feedback that you need. And I'm going to run you through the issues. The first one is Camp Baker and overnight staying in Camp Baker. If you've been on the Smith as I was on the Smith for my honeymoon. Well, it was a long time ago. And in fact, if you ever want to see this honeymoon get over, get in a canoe with the man you married because you for sure are going to get in a fight before you're around the first bend. But it's the usage has changed so dramatically since then. And now at Camp Baker, where everyone needs to take off from, it's just a clutter of RVs and people, and they're all huddled together there waiting for their time to launch. When COVID hit, the department innovated and created a phone reservation system that would allow people to call 2 days in advance, and they'd know exactly when they were going to launch, and they'd have already been given the information that they need, and they would come in and they present their driver's license and launch and be gone. And so that has been very popular, not only among users because you know when you're going to be floating, but also among other areas where people end up going. White Sulphur Springs is particularly pleased because people end up going there and taking advantage of the services that they offer rather than staying in Camp Baker. But it's also important for Camp Baker itself because the impact on just that much parking, that many people sleeping there, that many people walking around there, particularly at early spring, is really damaged that particular environment. So the group has looked at several proposals for what we do with Camp Baker. And one of them is to return to the overnight camping. Another is to allow overnight camping, but register people on the phone. But the one that I believe is going to go out to the public is that manage Camp Baker for day use only and continue this phone registration system. So you go there to launch, but you do not do overnight camping. And that should really alleviate the strain on that particular environment. and it should continue the efficiencies. But part of the reason that you do an environmental analysis is to get public feedback and to see if there are concerns. So that's an issue that will be going to the public. The next one has to do with waste management. This is kind of a stunning figure, I think. Approximately 500 pit latrines have been dug in our camps along the Smith River in the past 15 years. There are 1,200 since 1983. And on average, 34 pits are dug each season. And we are the only river in the 48 contiguous United States that does not require people to pack out their waste. And I was actually thinking this would be much more controversial among the members of this group than it has turned out being. Everybody is pretty much, yeah, it's a no-brainer. The legislature was good enough to fund our looking at this. It will involve some investment in infrastructure, particularly, and I'm probably not going to use the right term, but you're going to need some kind of disposal at the end of the route. But that will be going out for public comment, and in my view, really past time. The third issue is too many things here. Might have left out a page. I know that one is the lottery. What's the third one? Oh, the resource impacts on the sites. That's an important one because, again, with that much use, all of the different sites, all of the different camping that is going on there, even the waste management issue will not resolve the impacts on the sites. So we again have looked at a number of alternatives for that. One would be to reduce the minimum group size and or the number of groups that launch every day. Another one is just to close the river to floating for a particular period of time. We thought about rotating the camps so that you give one camp a break and that kind of thing. The preferred alternative, I believe, is to close the river to floating for a given period of time, probably that period of time that is March and April, because that's when the area is most fragile in terms of regrowth. So I believe that is what's going to go out to the public. Am I correct about that? Okay. The bottom line is that somehow you need to minimize the human use, but at the same time, and the group feels very strongly about this, that is such a popular river that they don't want to see people turned away from it. And that leads to the last issue that we've been dealing with, and that is the permit lottery. The way that you are able to float on the Smith is that there's a lottery every year. And if you want to float, you put your ticket in the hat and you hope it will be drawn. Quite a number of people rely on, most people get their float that way, but there are, for every happy person, there are an awful lot of unhappy people. And some people like me just I've never won a lottery in my life. I won it once when I was a school teacher, and I was poor, and they were auctioning off a quarter of a cow at the school where I taught, and I won it. And because I worked there, the principal wouldn't let me. I had to throw my ticket back in the pot. But there are people, these are hotly contested. We've tried many things to get around that. The math about how you could do that is extremely difficult. And I'm going to have somebody else explain the preferred alternatives for that. But the main thing is that there's a sense that Montanans in particular ought to be able to float that river. And the arguments on that subject have been pretty heated, and I don't think we've really arrived at a solution yet. So there's still work to be done for that. But those are the 4 issues that we're hoping to get feedback from the public on, and that we'll be coming to you with in December.
So I have a question for you, Member Mo. You said that the use is up 25%.
Just in the last 3 years.
In the last 3 years. There is a limited number of launches. That has not changed. And the party size has not changed. Are the groups, there being a bigger group, instead of 9, it could be 12 or so?
Up to 15.
Up to 15. Okay, that's all.
Thank you, Vice Chair. That was a great comprehensive overview. So we, since the last advisory committee meeting, which was my first day of the job, September 1st, have gone back to the drawing board some with the revision of the draft environmental assessment, making changes in response to the discussion that the advisory committee had. And Director Warsack.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And also just as the decision maker on the document, some additional questions I had about the existing condition, getting some more data in there about visitor use and whatnot. And so Colin Moss, I really need to give him a big kudos here. He is the park manager there and has gone back and really reworked some of those sections, and in doing so has come up with a potential different preferred alternative for consideration for the resource impact piece, which ends up tying into the discussion about lottery and that sort of things. But some of the additional information that he has included, and I'll just share it because you were asking about size of groups and whatnot. So I'm looking on my phone. Maybe I should turn it and that'll help me read it easier here on my phone. So he says the rate of visitation has grown significantly the past several years, most notably in the past, during 4 of the past 5. The total number of floaters exceeded over 6,000 people for the first time in 18, 19, and 20. The average number of private floaters was 5,147, a 61% increase over the average number of private floaters between 1997 and 2008. The user nights for private groups averaged 15,632 compared to 10,780, which would be a 45% increase. And then he talks about size of groups. So the growth in visitation is reflected in the average group size for private floaters, which averaged 7.74 floaters from 2017 to 2020, but saw a high in 2020 of 8.39 floaters per group. And this is a 21% increase over the average number of floaters per private group that you would have seen between 1997 and 2008. So he's really dug into those numbers to see what are the impacts, and he's looking particularly in the resource impacts at the sites as he's discussing this. And something that he started developing here is, how are we going to measure these impacts at the sites as we work on kind of getting our arms around this balance at the Smith, and this is the balance everywhere at every recreational opportunity we have in the state, and is big in the way we're moving forward with the new division, but balancing the recreational opportunity with conservation and preservation of the habitat and resource. And there's a tipping point that you have to be very mindful of. Quentin Kujala, when I asked him what his priorities for the new division were, in my interview said he wants Montana to be the #1 example in the country of striking that balance between recreational opportunity, but also preserving and conserving the resources. And so I'm taking that to heart, and I think you're seeing this reflected in this work that's coming up in this new draft EA that the advisory committee helped inform. Colin is sort of working into developing an adaptive management strategy where we have on one end the recreation ecology measures to help sites. So this can be things like importing materials like gravel or wood chips to harden camping sites, constructing rock steps on the boat landing, defining core kitchen areas and tent sites and boat camp boundaries. So we can limit the expansion of, or rather the loss of vegetative cover. And then also doing active revegetation measures and maybe some fencing to eliminate impacts from cattle grazing and also to bound the camps a little better. And then rest and rotate some of the more vulnerable camps and look at pursuing opportunities to add boat camps. Those might be limited, but it's on the list of things we could do under these ecology measures. And so looking at those pieces, but then also looking at the people piece. Those are the ecology measures, but then what are the things you can change with the people? And he has a list here of less restrictive things to moderately restrictive to more restrictive. So on the less restrictive side, it's public education and outreach to explain this problem of the impacts to the resources and how you can be good campers to help lessen it. And doing some maybe incentives to incentivize smaller group sizes, whether through you get more choicey camping sites to choose from if you have a smaller group size or something like that, down to the more restrictive things, which would be actually reducing the number of people that can be on the river. And so maybe looking at an adaptive management strategy for a time period where we're doing the ecology measures, those changes at the sites to help shape visitor use, but then at the less restrictive people changes of public education and outreach and maybe incentivizing smaller groups, doing that for a time period, seeing how that goes, measuring the impacts. What are we seeing with regrowth of vegetation, for instance, on sites? Has it been enough? And then reevaluating down the road and whether we need to be more restrictive with the actual people use. So this is a conversation we've been having internally, and we'll come back to the committee when we have this draft EA out for everybody to look at and comment on. But the other staff pieces, just want to point out on our side of things. So Colin's working on this. That has pushed our timeline a little bit on when we expect the draft environmental assessment to be out with these changes. But we are now thinking it would be more like probably early November that it would go out. And then we would have the next advisory committee meeting after the public comment period closes. We anticipate having a 30-day public comment period and doing 1 or 2 virtual meetings to collect public comment. We thought the virtual meeting was important for COVID considerations, but also ease of public comment, because this is a site that's so important across the state to many, many people. So rather than hosting something in person in Great Falls or White Sulphur or Helena. And then we hope to bring this back to you for consideration. The decision points that the board will have will be any particular rule changes on the Smith are in your decisional purview. And one of them would be related to packing waste out and making that a requirement. That would be a board decision. Some of these other decisions are administrative decisions that the department would do. But we have our eye on that December 9th board meeting of whether we will have a decision point for you by that time or not. Not exactly sure with the way the timeline's going right now, but that's the goal, is to bring something to you at December 9th. And again, when this draft EA goes out, we would get you a copy so that you could see that. Commissioners would receive it as well. That's just pointing out that we'll be communicating about this on the state parks website. And so there'll be links there and whatnot that people can access to get more information.
Chairman Yep, I've got a question. The last time I talked to Colin, I think it was last year, we were talking about the fees. And it's $25 for residents and $75 for non-residents. And he was saying that non-residents are surprised at how low the fee is. And it sounded like he supported raising those fees. Did they talk about that?
I don't think so. Do you remember that, Vice Chair? Not specifically, and
It's not really in our.
it hasn't been in the purview of what's been put in front of the committee to talk about.
I see.
But I think the discussion point would be in our 2-year review of looking holistically at all of the camping fees across the state and sites, but incorporating, you have particular decision-making authority on that Smith River fee. And so, but incorporating that into the overall process of looking at fees across sites.
Okay.
Yeah. Anything else on the Smith?
Any other questions?
I'm really pleased with the subsequent discussion because I think as a board, that balance is really important. Everybody wants to go out and recreate, but somebody has to take care of the place. And so I'm really pleased that you've dug into that more.
If we don't care for it, it won't be here for the
Right.
future generations. And that's what our job is to preserve it and steward it for future generations. So switching to a second project you all have received information on prior to, this is for the islands, the Flathead Lake Island Wildlife Habitat Protection Areas, Bird, Cedar, Douglas, and Goose Islands, just looking at what might happen with restricting and improving the management of the public recreation there. And the goal here, this is a directive really led by the Wildlife Division over concerns about the wildlife habitat on these islands and the impact that the visitors are having, particularly a primary one is human waste. It's a similar issue to the Smith, that it's not being packed out, et cetera, and it's becoming a detriment. And so that's a particular issue that they're looking at. But the real goal here is to manage this wildlife habitat protection area and to conserve wildlife habitat. And acknowledging that recreation is there, one option in the scheme of things that they're looking at, that's the far end option on the spectrum is just closing recreational use, but then also assessing what could be the middle points in those considerations. They are consulting with tribal staff to get their input on things. And Rachel Reckon will be talking with the tribal historic preservation officers regarding some cultural pieces that are there with the islands and considerations. And so just want you to know that that discussion is continuing. There's a draft environmental assessment in progress. And so that'll be coming out. And when it does, you will get a copy of that. But there's not a decision point for that one for you on that one. The next one I turn to is Missouri Headwaters. We have a master planning process going on there. As you're well aware, we have a contractor in place. They are close to finalizing the data collection phase. This has included looking at the soil composition of the site, also looking at the floodplain in the area as you think about, well, how could we build out amenities here? Where is it appropriate to put something? They have put out a community survey. It's been out for a few weeks now. It closes tomorrow to get people's information about how they're using the site in the past, how they'd like to use the site in the future, looking at their visitor satisfaction, and then also their ideas for development and possible future amenities. We're going to be taking that information back, balancing it with the data collection piece on what the site, based on the natural resources there, can realistically handle. But building in this need in whatever happens going forward with this master planning, the need to conserve the important heritage and cultural pieces there. We have Quinn Kuka, our tribal liaison, serving on the advisory team for this planning process. We also have a woman from the Cheyenne tribe, Ms. Small. Marcia Small is with us to help advise there as well and make sure those considerations remain at the forefront. We're looking also at, not just facilities and structures, but preservation of resources that are there, and also how to better interpret and educate the public about the importance of the site. With the survey, we just tried to cover a wide swath of people, the local community, yourselves that you should have received the survey link, local legislators, tribal contacts, other interested parties. We're really looking forward to getting those results and seeing kind of how people are feeling about it. And then the next step is to bring together this advisory team, which is a combination of staff and external partners. They're coming together on October 22nd to look at the survey results and the data that was collected by the contractor. And then that's going to inform the discussion about where the draft master plan goes from here. The contractor will be drafting that. We're expecting that the master plan will be a phased approach. What's some low-hanging fruit, sort of a phase 1, 2, and 3, looking farther out into the future is kind of what we're expecting to see. This master plan will not be the end-all be-all for particular projects. There would be and development, there would be individual environmental assessments, for instance, that would occur. But the master plan is envisioned to be a guiding document of where we want to take this, what we're prioritizing, and where we head next steps. I actually got to go see it on Monday this week with Marina Yoshioka, who is the regional supervisor, and Betsy Labrod, the regional park manager, and that was really informative to me. I'd been in the campground, but not further down, closer to the boat ramp, and just thinking about the opportunities there, and boy, that day use area is just beautiful. I don't know who all has been there, but the treed area and the nice interpretive kiosks with the grass growing on the roofs, it's just gorgeous down there. But thinking also more about how to connect the trails between Three Forks, but then also is there more trail opportunity on the riverfront. So anyway, lots of exciting possibilities there, and I look forward to seeing where this kind of ends up. We have a deadline for the contractor of getting the draft master plan in late November, early December for comment on the public, and then having a final document ready in early January. So that's kind of the timeline we're on. Any questions about that one?
I was kind of curious your opinion, like since you saw it recently. When I saw it not very long ago, like you said, the day use area and how that's developed, it's really nice, the kind of open and grassy in the landscape. And it's kind of like the campground is almost like its own different world. It's like this little tight little loop over here, and it doesn't really seem like the same place. It doesn't really flow. I mean, that was just my opinion. I was not that area was unattractive or whatever, but it just didn't seem like it was like two completely different areas.
A gated community.
Yeah. So
What was that, Vice Chair?
anyway, so I don't know what.
Oh, a gated community.
So I'll be curious to see what kind of feedback they get from folks that use that
Yeah.
area.
It's a great point, and I think that trail connectivity piece particularly is something that they're looking at between the campground. There are trails that exist, but making sure that everything connects up, and then also looking at expanded camping opportunities and whether a visitor interpretation center would be appropriate somewhere, and where that might fit. For me, down in that day use area, there was this most awkward loop across the highway where it seems like it's supposed to be a parking area, but there's really only room to drive around the loop. And I'm like, well, that seems like it could be reimagined somehow. So yeah, I look forward to the discussions too and seeing what the ideas come forward as.
And that's really a central location. You can go in any direction, and Clark Canyon, not Clark Canyon, the Lewis and Clark Caverns this way, Museum of the Rockies that way, all kinds of, you're right on the interstate. So
it's a great stopping point between the two national parks, for instance.
Yes.
It's just, I think there's such an opportunity there to get more camping and more use. Just to point out, with the cement plant that's down the road there by the old community of Trident, Betsy Labrod mentioned to me that they have been interested in the past in working with the park on building up that trail along the river, which right now is used by a lot of birders because of the nesting that occurs in the rock wall across the river. And the cement plant's interested in having a trail for their employees to use. And so could we connect up the trail that's there down to the cement plant? It's not very far. But working with them, and they have expressed interest in helping with the work and the funding needed to do it, and providing the resources. So I think there's a real opportunity there. There's some discussion about what should the speed limit be on the road also as we think about increased recreational use in there. And so there are many considerations, but lots of potential. Thanks. Yeah. Any other questions? So then moving on more generally into the capital projects program, I'm going to start this at a high level. So in May, you looked at and approved the capital projects list that came out of House Bill 5 from this legislature. And the reality is that there's not a ton to report on those specific projects because capital project development kind of lags a year behind the approval process. We can try and answer specific questions, but I'm going to start this out at a higher level of just talking about the capital project program and how it works. We start at the division level and submit ideas to the director's office on what are the capital projects that we'd like to undertake. And we talk about priorities and what's most pressing based on different kinds of needs. The director's office puts that out to the governor's office. Eventually, once those are vetted, the governor's office goes through its review process. It might approve, deny, or modify something. And if it makes it out of there, it goes to the legislature. The legislature, if it makes it through that process, ends up funded in House Bill 5, comes back to us. And that's where folks like Randy, Randy's gone. Okay, so I can't use her as my pointing prop here. At the Design and Construction Bureau come in and they start looking at the level of effort the project is going to take and how that fits in with the other projects already on their list of things, because this rolls year to year to year as it takes time to get these done. So they start looking at the level of effort that's going to be required and the prioritization of the projects based on available resources. It goes to the director's office for another look at that list and okay, what's higher priority, what's most pressing. And then it comes back to you all once that's sorted out, which is where you were in May, getting the commission approval or the board approval in this case. And then once you all have signed off, then it goes back to design and construction to start really getting into the nitty gritty and developing the bid documents and starting to research the actual costs and whatnot. And this is a long way of saying there are so many considerations. I had my first meeting that I sat in with design and construction last week with Beth. And it took us 2.5 hours. There are 120 projects on just the park side of the division's capital project list. And so that was a good reality check for me on just the scope of the work to be done. Lots of great support for lots of good projects. And we'll just have to be methodical in getting through everything. And also coming out of the one of the things we have to consider as we work through these is that the cash balance has to be there for the project to proceed. So you might get through all the planning pieces and then we're waiting for the cash or the particular funding source to come in if there's a match or whatever it is, a grant. And so there might be some hang up and hold time with that. And sometimes we have to remodel the projects based on developments in cash or various things. And so, or just the realities on the ground. Once we start digging into a project, we might have to tweak something. So lots of considerations. But on this list that you all approved last time, we had in particular a couple of general projects with the diversified lodging and then also the interpretive and exhibit upgrades statewide. We had $500,000 for each of those groups of projects, and Beth has been doing really great work with the regions, and I thank them for all of their cooperative effort and starting to prioritize, okay, what are our needs? What are the highest priority needs? We've got some great solid ideas for diversified lodging that we're going to be working through, looking particularly at sites where they're ready to go. The ground is hardened because of the existing use. And so it would be very easy to put, for instance, a small cabin there and have that ready to go relatively quickly. And then some of the other options are a little further down the road and need to be wrapped into our bigger planning process. of where we're prioritizing work first. The signs, I've been getting an education in how hard it can be and how long it can take to get a sign erected. Mr. Chair, Bannock sign, still not there. We are working on it. I want to assure you of that. And at this stage, and I apologize for the delay at this point, but at this stage, it makes sense to wrap that one into the holistic sign review. We're having a meeting with Amy Glasscock from DNC, who is the sign maven. She is our sign person and knows lots of great things about the federal requirements, et cetera. But we're also looking at how do we bring our signs into the future and redesign them so they're very attractive and help invite people in and whatnot. And so I've asked people to, I know we want to get that Bannock sign in, for instance, and it is a priority, but let's be thoughtful in how we do it and make sure we incorporated it into this bigger process that we're going to be doing so we don't have to do it twice. I would like to get the right sign there once rather than just throw something up and have to come back to it. So I appreciate your patience with that. I know it's frustrating.
Was that sign vandalized?
Was that what happened originally? There was some destruction. It's being categorized as some destruction. And, we just had another report out of Region 2 at First Peoples having a sign shot up out there. And that's part of this consideration as we look at our sign planning. We just went through a process for fishing access sites. And MDT has asked us to look at a new material. It's a polymer. I'm not a science person, not a technical person, but it's a polymer of some kind that does well or better against bullets and lead than the metal signs do. And so they've asked us to investigate looking at that and using that for our new FAS signs, for instance. And I think that's something that we would look at with our park signs as well. So we have a meeting that we're scheduling in early November and we'll start digging in on that. With everything going on with the new division, there's just so much work to do and it's all great work and important work. And we're just going as fast as we can. I got to remind myself it's a marathon, not a sprint, because I just want to get it all done, but it's good to be thoughtful about it. And so we'll keep you posted and updated on how things are going. Any other particular questions though with anything? So then if you're ready to move on, weed management was the next thing on our list, or the list that you gave us particular interest in. I'm going to ask Beth to get into the weeds for us.
Thank you, Hope. And just for the record, my name is Beth Shoemate, Assistant Administrator of the Parks and Outdoor Recreation Division. Chair Kip and members of the board, I am happy to try to explain weed management. I know you also had some very specific inquiries about some specific sites as well. So I'll try and dive in a little bit deeper into the weeds there. And just as a broad overview, though, I will just say that trying to treat weeds is certainly not an exact science. There is certainly just the weather factor alone, as well as seasonal factors that come into play as far as trying to actually treat weeds during a certain time of year. And so a lot of that is weather dependent. And then of course, it's also resource dependent, depending on if we try and get to some of those, especially chemical treatments in the springtime. We oftentimes really try to focus on spring treatments because that is typically the best application time period. However, if it's really rainy or you can't get those treatments applied in the spring, then we oftentimes will try and do it a little bit later in the season during summer or fall, but that's somewhat dependent upon our resources, especially our seasonal staffing levels. So that comes into play to some degree. And so with some of the inquiries, I know that there were some concerns around knapweed in particular. I believe it was Chair Kip that you had some questions about, especially Region 2, probably in light of some of your camping and tours in the Bitterroot. And so Fort Owen, as well as Travelers Rest, and then Milltown State Park, it sounds like. And so I do want to just touch base about those in particular. And I'll start with Travelers Rest, and I do have our noxious weed management report. We have a weed management coordinator that actually is out of our regional office in Missoula, Region 2, by the name Adam Sieges. And so he puts together this wonderful fiscal year annual report as it relates to not only just state parks, weed management and what we're doing there, but also all of our fishing access sites, department lands in general, as well as our wildlife management areas. And so that is a really great report that I believe is in your board materials. And so you can certainly look at that. But in particular to the Region 2 sites, so Travelers Rest, just last year in fiscal year 2020, we expended just about $37,000 in both mechanical treatments as well as chemical treatments. And I know that knapweed was in particular the concern, and we did have staff go out in light of your inquiries in the month of August to just make sure that we aren't seeing any knapweed at that point in time. And so they were able to pull there were a couple plants that they were able to just manually pull. And then we're also trying to always make sure that we're working with our landowners, our adjacent private property landowners, and there are some knapweed concerns as it relates to that adjacent landowner. So we're always trying to be in good communication with those folks as well. And then I'll move down the Bitterroot here, Fort Owen. We expended about just shy of $3,000, again, in both mechanical and chemical treatment applications at Fort Owen as well. Of course, Fort Owen is only the size of now almost 2 acres. It was 1 acre, so just a small site there, but we are still making sure that we're taking care of the weeds. And there, again, there was some adjacent landowner knapweed sites identified. So I was trying to work with that landowner as well. And then I'll move on over to the other side of the region at Milltown, where we expended just about $12,000 in both chemical and mechanical treatment. And so we do have our staff out there working as hard as possible as far as it relates to weed management, and have a great report for you. And the last thing I'll touch on is the Russian olive at Makoshika State Park. I believe you also had an inquiry about that. And so Russian olive is a little bit of a unique plant, and it is actually considered as a class 3 plant on the Montana State Noxious Weed list. And so we aren't necessarily obligated by law to treat it because it is that class 3 plant. It's considered a regulated plant. And so that means that we cannot knowingly or willfully propagate that species. So due to that, it's such a widespread species you find, especially throughout eastern Montana. However, we typically, if we do treat Russian olive at all, and we start seeing some of those new shoots, we'll try and actually go out and manually treat some of those Russian olives by cutting it and trying to get the roots actually out of the ground. That typically takes repeated visits in order to do that. I have actually removed some Russian olive myself on some private property that we have in eastern Montana, and it is definitely a resilient plant. So that's, I think, hopefully answers the inquiries that the board had as far as it relates to weed management, but happy to stand for questions.
Yeah, my question when I asked that to begin with, I didn't know if the department had its own weed equipment and they actually went after it, or was that the counties? Did they kick money into the county? Beaverhead Weed Board, and they've got lots of sprayers and kids employed all summer long out spraying, but I didn't know if they did the fish and game sites or not. And after I asked those questions, about a week later, I saw a fish and game bobcat or a rhino or something with a weed spraying tank and tore down on it sitting at a parking lot in Dillon. I said, oh yeah, they got their own stuff.
Yeah.
But I didn't know where so you're using it at fishing access sites, at wildlife management sites and that?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Just to respond to your question there, yes, we do have our own equipment that is housed at various locations throughout the state, depending on whether it's at a department headquarters like Region 4 near Giant Springs and that the Region 4 weed equipment would then go out across all of the Region 4 sites. And they would certainly work on all department lands. So not only parks, but also fishing access sites and wildlife management areas. And I think in the spirit of this reorg, it will make really good sense to make sure that we are streamlining those processes as it relates to weed management. So a good opportunity for us to find some efficiencies perhaps.
So on the Smith River, there was a lot of leafy spurge. And being that is a state park, but it's also, Forest Service and BLM and private. Is the department helping there with weeds or just at the launch sites, campsites?
Yeah, so I can speak on behalf of the Smith River weed management efforts. And I think we also still have probably John Taylor on the line as well, maybe can help fill in details. But I do know that we certainly work in concert with all of those landowners, Forest Service, private landowners, as well as ourselves, of course. And then we also partner with the Smith River Habitat Project. And they are essentially a nonprofit group that actually applies to the Noxious Weed Trust Fund grant program and secure those grant funds to help supplement any of our weed management efforts as well. So it's a really great partnership that we work with and every year they go out and do these weed applications and treatments throughout the Smith River corridor. So that's a really great partnership, and just maybe going to look to John if he's still on the line to see if he maybe wants to fill in any more details there. If he's still here.
He's there.
Yeah.
Chairman Kip, members of the board, once again, John Taylor, Region 4 Park Manager. Yes, we do have a really active weed management program on the Smith, and really not to be redundant, but the Smith River Habitat Project has been ongoing for a number of years, and they do actually work on all land ownerships, including Forest Service, private, and FWP. And they do a really great job. We supply them with some funding. They generally go twice a year, sometimes in July, sometimes in the fall. So we have a very active weed program on the Smith. However, leafy spurge, as you know, is really problematic. It spreads easily. Oftentimes when the river gets high, it spreads seed. So, but we do provide a lot of active weed management. We have weed pulls. We have volunteers show up who float the river with the rangers and do weed pulls at particular sites. So yeah, we're very active at it, but it's an ongoing problem that we're trying to get a handle on, and maybe someday we will.
Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you.
I think John addressed it, but John, did you say weevils? The beetles?
Member Brown, you know, we have done some insect releases on the river over the years. I can't really tell you when. One of the reasons they haven't been too effective is because of water flows. So when the insects are released, they can do their thing, but the next year they're just all washed down and they're not there anymore. So the success of the biocontrol has been, I'd say, mediocre at best.
Interesting. I was floating at one time where there were a group putting out the beetles for leafy spurge. And so thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions? And if I might just take a quick moment to address Board Member Brown wanted to talk a little bit more about the Lake Elmo drawdown and that overall project. And so We are in the process of doing the lake drawdown, which means it will literally get down to a dry lake bed at Lake Elmo State Park near Billings, just for everybody's awareness of the location of that. This has been quite an effort due to the Asian clams that were found. I believe it was in 2019 that our fisheries staff identified that we have Asian clams there, which is a somewhat rather unique aquatic invasive species that we want to try and tackle and address right now before they're spread elsewhere. And so in light of that finding, we are drawing Lake Elmo down. And I just talked to the regional supervisor earlier today, and he said that the drawdown project overall is about 1 week ahead of schedule, which is really great news. Not often are we always ahead of schedule, so I'll take that as a win. So a shout out to the regional staff there and getting that moving along so well. Currently, it's right about 4 feet of water as far as what remains in Lake Elmo. And people are coming just to kind of watch and observe. So our visitation has definitely seen an uptick. People are just curious and interested, and it's not every day that you're drawing a lake down to the dry lake bed. And so they are finding some interesting things, quite a bit of garbage. No bodies at this point. So this is good news. They did find a handgun and turn it into enforcement. So they're looking into that. And once that drawdown, we're just going to kind of continue to have that proceed. The pumping contractor will then come in to get the last remaining bit of water out of there. And so they look to begin that pumping process soon, probably within the next week to 2 weeks. And in the meantime, they have been working extensively with the irrigation district and all irrigation operators, literally on a daily basis. It sounds like they are communicating just to make sure that we're not impacting the irrigation users down the line with this drawdown, and that they have enough water to do their irrigation. One of the first projects that will be occurring here, and sounds like about the next month, is the hand launch. And so we're going to be putting in a hand launch that will allow for the watercraft users to be more readily accessible for especially ice fishermen. And as you're trying to carry in, a heavy kayak or canoe or something like that, it'll aid in that process. So make the lake more accessible to those users, which is really great. So that'll be happening pretty soon. And they've had a lot of contractor interest when they are going out for bids in any of these projects. As far as it relates to the actual state park footprint of this, I know that we also have secured a trails project grant. And so we will be putting in and improving the trail that goes around Lake Elmo State Park. So that's going to be really wonderful to see here. And that'll probably happen next summer, next spring, summer timeframe. So that's the Lake Elmo drawdown latest status of affairs. Are there any questions about that?
So I was talking with Terry Walters earlier and wondered, and I'm sure that they have a plan in place, but that water eventually goes into the Yellowstone. And it seems like when they start pumping, Terry explained that they pull the water off the top initially, and then they'll get to a level that won't work anymore. And so they'll have to pump it. Mm-hmm. But do you know anything about protecting the Yellowstone River when they're pumping from the invasive species?
Board Member Brown, I would have to check in with the people that are a little bit more familiar with the overall project in trying to address the actual invasive species. I am certainly not an expert and would want to make sure that I'm responding to that accurately, but we can certainly provide an email and get that information to you.
Okay, good. And I can check in on it as well. It'd be interesting to hear.
Yeah, this is definitely one of those teamwork type projects where we have pretty much all hands on deck from many different divisions and the biologists and all the specialists and experts working on it. So, but we can certainly keep providing information.
Well, I think it's really great work that they're doing to eradicate them.
Yeah, and it'll be just such a really great enhancement to Lake Elmo
Will.
in general, as far as improved accessibility and really making it much more of just a user-friendly park in general. So we're really looking forward to it. Yeah,
Thank you.
a unique opportunity. Thank you.
So I have one question about the Lone Pine State Park. You're going to try to negotiate purchasing that 9 acres. How is that going? Can you report on that?
Yeah, Chair Kip and members of the board, I can certainly try and respond to that. So what Chair Kip is referring to, just as a quick reminder to everybody, that was our Lone Pine State Park acquisition proposal for 9 acres that we brought to the board, I believe, in May.
Yes.
And you initially approved that endorsement to move that project forward, which allows us to do our due diligence and analysis and continue to negotiate with that landowner that has come forward and offered that 9-acre property as an addition to Lone Pine, that we could then expand the archery range footprint. And I actually walked Lone Pine about a month ago with the park manager that, gosh, Brian happens to still be on, so maybe he can even help respond to any of the details here as well. But it's a really beautiful location. It's literally right at the top. So you get 360-degree views of the Kalispell Valley, and the Foys to, Blacktail Trail starts right off to the distance there, and you get Foys Lake at the base. It's an absolutely beautiful 9-acre property. And so we are in the process of working with the landowner. I know Brian and I believe our lands unit, Mimi Wallach, have been in communication with him, and we are in the process of trying to work out some type of purchase agreement. And also this would be a Pittman Robertson funded project because of that expansion possibility for archery users. And we already have that existing archery range in place. So it would just be a really easy expansion to extend a couple targets and trails for those archery users, as well as just general hikers and bikers and whoever else is on that trail system. So we do hope to potentially be bringing that back to the board, I believe, in our December board meeting. But Brian, curious if you want to say any more about the status and latest update on that project. If he's still there. He's a trooper if he's still with us.
He's there.
There he is. We can't hear you, Brian, if you're trying to talk. Doesn't have audio. Oh,
There he is.
There he comes. Brian, if you can maybe try to unmute again. There he is. Okay, well, hopefully my response satisfies you, since unfortunately we can't hear you. Yep, that's okay. Hopefully I was accurate. Yeah. Okay.
So it seems right now with COVID and everything, any land that's available gets sold in a hurry. So these kind of things, you probably need to move pretty fast or as fast as you can. And finding a contractor to do cabins or anything seemed like that would be very difficult.
Yes.
I wanted to build a house this year, can't do it, can't find anybody.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a trying time.
It is, and especially with the proximity of Lone Pine to Kalispell and how much that whole Flathead and Kalispell region is expanding and inching up closer and closer. And there was just a a home that was built there. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, Brian was telling me, and one of those just sort of opportunities, like, gosh, if we only could have, but this will be a really great addition.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you for all being here. And this was helpful to me, and I'm sure the board, just to kind of see everything that's happening. I mean, it's nice we have an agenda and we look at the things you bring to us, but we need to know what's happening everywhere. And it's great. You're doing a great job.
Bet we're glad to have you, and we've said it a couple of times, maybe off the microphone, but we really appreciate your dedication. I mean, it just shows in the site visits that you're making and your level of interest and inquiry. It's awesome, and that's exactly what we need. So thank you so much for helping elevate state parks. Yeah.
Does any other board members have anything to say? All right.
You know, I realized I didn't go over any visitation numbers with you, or you guys want a 30-second recap on the first half of the year for visitation?
Sure.
Of course, now I got to find it, but so when you look at this year compared to last year, visitation is an increase of 11% over last year. That's not across the board. We have about 27 parks that experienced an increase compared with last year, but 16 that experienced a decline. So it's not across the board. But so 11% growth from last year, but over 2019 pre-COVID, a 44% increase. So it's big.
Yes.
It's real big. So that'll be my nutshell. And if you have any particular parks that you're interested in, I've got the data here and we can talk afterward if you want to suss that out.
So one other thing, we had fire season and we didn't have any parks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, I forgot about that one. So we did not have any parks that had any burns. We had some closures related to fires. Cooney, for instance, for a time, the recreational water use was closed because they were dipping out of there to fight that fire by Red Lodge. And there was one other site that experienced a closure like that. Pictograph Cave. But no, as far as we're aware of, no direct impacts on parks otherwise. So good news.
All right.
Oh, and Finley Point was closed because of that fire over by Polson that was so close.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll keep you posted on what's happening with that lease, the BNSF lease at Summers, and whether or not we need to gather you on Zoom for a review of that briefly sometime before December. But otherwise, we'll plan to see you in December. Do you have a sense of, would you like to try to continue to meet in person? Would you rather be in Zoom?
In person, weather allowing especially.
Yeah.
Really you, Kathy.
Oh, no,
I think we ought to meet in
I'm finished with-
Glendale.
Yeah, I'll host you guys. Out of the rats.
Sounds great. But, to that end, we would like to have some travel meetings where we get out and around and see some sites. The winter might not be the opportune time to do it.
Right.
But, thinking about that spring meeting and whether we might be up in the Kalispell area and pair that with some sort of ribbon cutting at Summers, some sort of appreciation event for all the parties that were involved with that. We have our eyes on those kinds of things, just to let you know.
That would be
Nice.
fun. I'd like to see that.
Yeah.
I am one of these people that was, we don't need more from 2001, but boy, was I wrong. We did one in Glendale just recently that did so much. It was just a local thing, not this group or anything, but raised the money and put beachfront in Eric Holliker, and it saved that bank. It gave access, and any day you drive by, even now in this weather, you'll see kids out there swimming and playing. It's awesome. So, and it does help remediate the erosion type issues there. Really made a difference.
Yeah, good to hear.
It was, boy, yes, you'll have to drop in and see that.
Another area of opportunity will be the Lower Yellowstone recreational corridor discussion that's happening right now, east of Hysham to the North Dakota border. We have a public working group They met again yesterday morning. They're exploring those things and have tasked themselves with various efforts as we work on that. And we'll keep you all tied into that conversation as pieces might become part of the board's decision-making process. There's a lot to shake out there, but there might be also some visitation opportunities with that too as we get further down the road. But they're hoping to have a really good idea about where they're headed and the recommendations they're going to make to the department by January. So we'll see how that goes and keep you tuned. So, thank you.
I believe Colleen has some parting gifts for the board members.
Oh, Colleen. Yeah, we'll just officially end the meeting though first, maybe Mr. Chair.
Okay. So